it's become really real as far as the talk. And look, it's always in, it's always out, it's always hot, it's cold, and it's always smoke season as far as whether or not the Cleveland Browns are interested in a quarterback at number 2. Todd McShay's recent podcasts becomes another voice saying that maybe the Browns are not interested in quarterback at number 2. Well, how does that work out if that is the case? We'll play it out for you. Pete Smith joins Browns 3D with your host, Jeff Lloyd. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR, brought to you by State Sharpening Motor Sales and Service. Pete Smith in for the ride. Look, yeah, obviously this time of year it's extremely difficult, and you have to choose wisely as to what you want to believe and what you don't want to believe. And of course, everybody will tend to sway with maybe, rumors being reported that certainly support, their own narrative, of course. We've kind of felt this way personally, and this is just basically on our evaluations, is that maybe there isn't a quarterback in this class that is strong enough to invest in at number 2. Maybe, Cam Ward's a fit. Shedeur Sanders, we've voiced our negatives in regards to that. Part of it, I think could also be from the Browns standpoint, and, is maybe they feel Cam Ward would be their guy. Maybe they feel they have no opportunity at Cam Ward. Maybe he's going 1 overall. Maybe Tennessee trades out of number 1. I got to be honest, a lot of people that say the Cleveland Browns have to take a quarterback, I believe those same people should be saying the same things about the Tennessee Titans. I believe those people should be saying the same things about the New York Giants. But be that as it may. Pete, as we're going to, basically get ready here, we'll go through this weekend. And I'll be honest, this is pretty much the last kind of respite for anybody, as far as, covering NFL teams, because once next week hits, and obviously free agency right behind it, pretty much off the rails here. But Pete, we're going to try and create a scenario here. A, would the Browns stay at 2, make a selection? Or B, there are teams that are rumored and have been rumored to these quarterbacks since the regular season was still going on.
So a lot of this comes down to, do you believe the Tennessee Titans are going to take Abdul Carter? If you do, then the Browns are either going to take Cam Ward or sell off the pick. And the suggestion is that they would then sell off the pick. And at that point, you've got 3 teams that are interesting, which are the New York Giants at 3, the Las Vegas Raiders at 6, or the New York Football Jets at 7. And at that point, you're probably really trying to get 6 or 7 to come up and get Cam Ward at that point, who, most everybody's at least starting to admit that there may be teams that have Sanders rated higher. The overall opinion is that Cam Ward is sort of the top guy. So that is what they're doing. So from one standpoint, you can say at least the Browns are selling off what would be projected to be the top quarterback, or at least giving them the option. So that has value and could potentially net you some more draft assets. I mean, if Cam Ward goes 1, I will be very surprised if the Browns don't have a very small market of 1 team. They're trying to get to move up 1 spot and then take Abdul Carter. But in a scenario where Carter's gone and you're at 2 and you don't love the quarterbacks, you're moving down. And then it becomes a question of what happens at that point. Because at that point, Carter's off the board. The quarterbacks are presumably off the board. And then it's, what do you do? And is it too high for an offensive lineman that's probably going to kick inside the guard? Probably. I mean, there's a world where you could do it.
And also, Pete, that wouldn't be a terrible scenario, just the way the Browns are structured right now. You figure Dewan, the knee, whatever. Now, again, one thing you're worried, look, supposedly he's at a good weight right now. Just had surgery, may lay it up again. Then you worry about maybe the weight coming back. Bitonio stays. You've got Campbell, who can maybe you buy a year or 2, at left tackle, and that he could kick inside. Maybe DeJuan end up on the right side, and then you revisit in a year or two looking for a left tackle.
Possible. Personally, I think once DeJuan Jones goes to the left side, he's never going anywhere else. Just because, and this is just
you don't want to do it to anybody.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's just he's not a good run blocker, and if your run game is always predicated to go sort of the right, which is where they've been. I mean, right now you've got Wyatt Teller and Jack Conklin
hiding a 6'9", 370-pound guy.
Yeah, I mean, and that's been their sort of their money making plays is pulling Joel Bitonio to the right and let those guys go to work. It's not to say you can't do it the other way. It's just that's sort of how they've been structured. So my theory of the case is that they're just not going to go that route. And personally, yeah, I think Will Campbell's better suited for guard than tackle, but at least you can find out. And if you're in a sort of the win as many games as possible mode, if you were to get what most people believe, even if he's not a tackle, will be a fantastic offensive lineman, and you were then, as we talked about the quest to run the ball, that certainly gets you part of the way there. The other question is then, if it's not offensive line, is there a defensive playmaker where the Browns are super thrilled about that? Like Mike Green, are they going to love him enough? I doubt it. Are they going to love one of these other sort of traitsy but didn't actually produce defensive linemen, whether it's a Shamar Stewart or Michael Williams? I'm inclined to say no. But you never know. Do they take depending on how he checks out the combine? Or the more likely scenario to me at that point is wide receiver. And there are two things that I think are going to be interesting. One is going to be the Travis Hunter conversation. Historically, wide receivers don't go as high as many are projecting Travis Hunter to go. They usually end up going about 4, 5, 6, 7 range. So if you throw out a scenario and you go Abdul Carter goes 1, somebody comes up and gets Cam Ward, and then New England is almost certainly going to take, if he's there, Mason Graham.
Yep.
It's really just a question of what the Giants do. Are they going to just take Shedeur Sanders at that point? At which case you're already at 5, and maybe the Jacksonville Jaguars are willing to do that. Maybe they're not, but he might be there at 6 or 7. And at that point, are you sitting there thrilled? Because in my evaluation, I think you're sort of on the same page with me. For the Browns, Travis Hunter is a wide receiver first, and maybe a DB second, and in which case he's not really a corner. I think at that point he's sort of I think they just make him a position, which is more or less a safety, and just say, go get the football.
Cover 4, safety, absolutely. You will be the center fielder we haven't been able to find in the 5 years we've been doing this. Exactly.
Yeah, and then, is that an option? Or the other one is you go to the big body guy in Tet McMillan from Arizona, who's 6'5", 212. Would be really interesting to see how he runs. He's not Mike Evans, but is he Drake London? Is he maybe a little bit better than Drake London? He's a guy with an insane catch radius. He's somebody that really good chain mover, somebody who can win in the red zone, all those type of things. Does that complement what you have with the other receivers you've added to this team, and gives you sort of another true X type, but you can move them around? And in a world where we are presuming they're going to sign a veteran quarterback in March, and if this is all assuming they're not interested in this quarterback class, if it's a Kirk Cousins, a Daniel Jones, if it's whoever you want it to be, are the Browns far more interested in the scenario where you have Jerry Jeudy, Tet McMillan, Cedric Tillman, David Njoku, so on and so forth, and suddenly you're really interested? Like, I'll be honest, I would have a whole lot of fun watching Jameis Winston just chuck the ball down the field to these guys. But that suddenly becomes a really interesting setup. And then obviously the next year, still looking for a longer term solution. Does that make your quarterback search, one, a little bit easier in terms of being able to project success forward is if Ted McMillan hits it, or Hunter, either one of these guys hits the ground running and is good for you, and you have Jerry Jeudy who plays well, and you have Njoku and maybe somebody else develops. Suddenly you have all these weapons, and now you get a quarterback and you're sitting there, all right, now we're good, as opposed to right now where you're sitting here going, yeah, the Browns need to get a quarterback, but we also want to see them get more weapons and all these other things. Does that make it sort of a more interesting, more sort of tantalizing prospect for the Browns to sort of really address, set up the offense to then go figure out who the best quarterback is in 26, perhaps?
Yeah, because I think, when you talk in this trade down scenario, I think everybody was the dream scenario where you can go down one spot, maybe still get, Abdul Carter. But you get, you have to look at this and intelligently, who is, would be going in on these quarterbacks. And, look, just because the Browns don't see it one way, it doesn't mean other teams don't see it, obviously, the other way. And, maybe, they view their roster structure differently. Maybe they view their window of opportunity differently as far as trading up. But, when you talk about the teams that, looking like they should be in on quarterbacks, certainly both New York teams, certainly Las Vegas, the rumor certainly is, very well, I mean, not the rumor, obviously the talk of Tom Brady, with, Shedeur Sanders, already having had some, conversations, some chats and trying to mentor. And, everybody that you talk to Raider wise basically says that Tom Brady's in charge. How he's still announcing games, I have no idea. It really seems like a absolute, contrast of, a big, conflict of interest there with Tom Brady being able to call games and basically the role that he has in what's going on with the Las Vegas Raiders. But, if you look at that, and again, if anybody's, not talking about the importance of wide receiver for this team, I don't think there's anybody else on the roster that's had a season of more than 26 or 27 catches other than Jerry Jeudy at the wide receiver position. It is a huge need. And it's been something that the Browns have been trying to, have found a way to address in trade market the last 3 years. But like I've been telling you guys, I've pretty much been through all 31 teams. It's really difficult to find that guy this year that you just think, okay, there's the Browns wide receiver trade target. If you want a name, maybe Romeo Doubs, Green Bay Packers. It's a name. I'll just give you that. We're going to continue on here. Your latest Browns 3D. Pete Smith here, along joining in here with Jeff Lloyd. Appreciate everybody. Make sure you subscribed on YouTube. Certainly make sure you subscribed on Twitch. And of course, checking out the written content daily over at the OBR. We've been talking for a couple of weeks now, and we are certainly thankful for the good folks at State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights. If you are local to the Cleveland area, they are your one-stop shop for all things lawn equipment. Listen, you want to spend your Sundays watching the Cleveland Browns, not cutting your grass. Let the guys at State help you get your weekend back. They specialize in both residential and commercial equipment for Toro. The brand professionals have counted on for more than 100 years. Whether you are looking for a new, dependable, time cutter, zero turn, genuine Toro replacement parts, or expert service from experienced technicians who keep your mower running in peak condition, State has got your back. They're veteran owned. The Kane family are lifetime Clevelanders, lifetime Browns fans, and proud supporters of the OBR. Again, if you're local to Cleveland, State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights is your hometown team for all your lawn equipment needs. All their info is at the site, statesharp.com. That is STATESHARP.com. Continuing on here, Browns 3D. Pete Smith joining me here. Jeff Lloyd. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. Pete, now, this is one that's kind of floating around. And certainly, you would think here with, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, obviously a lot of pressure to get, hopefully, the quarterback situation situated now. Realizing that may not be a possibility, and I think a lot of people are saying, well, if the Browns don't go quarterback at 2, the Browns trade down, they go another avenue, go veteran, there's some trying to suggest that maybe Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, basically you said, look, we'll get through 2025, and then, what we can do in 25 will lead up to hopefully a huge progression in 26. My first thought on that is if I had Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, even if I was told this by Jimmy Haslam, I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it. 3-14, you don't really have any idea where 25 can go. Even if you think it's a handshake agreement, I'm not buying it. I'm saying I know I have to go out and put out a really, really solid product to believe that I'm going to get the opportunity to go look at this quarterback class in 2026.
Sure. I mean, I don't think it's, again, I don't look at this as a 3-win roster, but nevertheless.
True. Yes, but that's also part of the problem, though. Some of it was their own doing, saying, look, hey, let's get as high up, in the draft planning as we can. But the same thing is, it's not necessarily a 3-win roster, but it was a 3-win roster.
Right. So, look, I mean, it comes down to, you have certain things that you can do that are going to make your team better. If you can run the football better, you're going to be a better football team. If you can play defense at a consistently high level, you're going to have a better football team. I think those are both achievable goals for this team in an off season. It just depends on how they want to go about it. And if we're talking about trading down and free agency and stuff like this, and they can add a bunch of pieces that I think really become interesting. If you suddenly have, 6th and 37 and picks next year, or 7 and 42 and picks next year, in addition to the other picks you have, then I think that becomes really interesting, because you still have 33rd pick. That's 3 in the top, 42 in that scenario. Those are guys you can get in and improve the team. And I think it's a debate to if the Browns are able to trade down. I think it's a debate regardless, but do you want to improve the running game by investing a ton in the offensive line, and I mean through the draft, and then getting a running back like later and letting the offensive line sort of carry the load? Or do you want to get a feature back and sort of try to get offensive linemen as well? And obviously, if you have 2 second-round picks, you could theoretically do both. That can sort of give you a direction. And this is even assuming if they bring back Nick Chubb. But if they sit there at 33 and they want to take an Omarion Hampton if he lasts that long, or a Caleb Johnson if he lasts that long, and then at 42, or get an offensive lineman at 33, I think that's probably the more realistic scenario. Get up a Donovan Jackson or a Jonas Savaiinaea from Arizona, a big hulking guy who's going to step in at guard, potentially, if there's an injury, or is going to be ready to go in a year or whatever. And then at like 37 or 42, you get that feature back. Or do you just want to get a couple offensive linemen? Do you want to get like an Arianti Ursare, a big tackle type and a guard? And then maybe you wait a little bit to one of those 3rd-round picks or later. Personally, I think this class is deep enough that you can get guys who are going to contribute and be like potentially stars on day 3. But, for people who either casually are watching or want to sort of get that feeling that, oh, I should be excited about this, you're probably going to be thinking, man, I hope they get one of those guys no later than maybe that 67th or maybe the 94th pick, somewhere in that round 3. But if I get one in round 2, suddenly I'm like, oh, okay, I guess they're serious about really getting this thing going now.
Now, bringing up the running back position, and Daniel Jeremiah had his conference call yesterday. I believe it's Casey Kidman who wrote it up. And actually, he spoke specifically about Brown running back targets. And, with the scenario Pete's playing out here, where if you're getting that extra 2nd-round pick and you're getting 3 in the top 42, whatever that case, certainly now it gives you the ability to go brand name at running back. And look, this is the joy of this running back class. Look, there's going to be running backs everywhere. When the run starts will certainly be interesting. 2 of the biggest names, McShay and certainly Jeremiah, had 3 running backs in their most recent 1st-round mocks. Look, if it's you need to score touchdowns. So if you think the wide receiver class has got some issues, and, compared to some other classes, it certainly does, which is another thing I think about Travis Hunter. You're drafting him that high. You're expecting Malik Neighbors return. You're expecting Brian Thomas Jr. return, Ladd McConkey return. Like, that's what you were hoping he would do if you're spending that type of pick on him as a rookie. Another story as we continue down the road, of course. But that certainly puts you in that position, and it could be kind of funny where, maybe that this could start off for them wide receiver, running back, offensive line, and hoping the defense rebounds and just generally plays better. Because, as great as they were in 23, maybe that's not the real case. As poor as they were in 24, Probably not the real case either. Maybe somewhere a little bit more in between. I would probably lean a little closer to 23 play than certainly on the 24 play. But and I agree with you. Like, even if Nick Chubb comes back, look, we have to face the reality that the Nick Chubb era is coming to an end soon. What he has done to this point is absolute amazement. That just the Georgia injury, not even getting to what he's been through, since 2023, of course. But you get to that name and Caleb Johnson and TreVeyon Henderson, and the top of this running back class. That's and like you said, pairing it with what could be a Tet Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, all of a sudden, if it's Kirk Cousins, it's Daniel Jones. Well, you're giving certainly somebody a lot to work with.
Yeah, I think on the Nick Chubb thing, I basically just saying let him surprise you, but you have to play reality. I agree with you. I agree. I think they're ultimately going to bring him back, but still have to be honest with it, because if he gives you 80% of Nick Chubb and you have somebody else, sure, and you still have Jerome Ford who looked good, and you're hopefully drafting.
You can find a way. You can find a way to use, and Ford, who can contribute in the receiving game. If it was TreVeyon Henderson, who certainly can contribute in the receiving game. Nick always worked hard at that. It was never really his calling card. Most certainly didn't need to be. So you could say, hey, we can find a way to make sure we're getting 10 to 12 carries a game for Nick Chubb. We can use Ford. We can use Henderson. Henderson is really established as a pass pro back up at this point. And you say, hey, 25, 30 touches, maybe just there, and certainly dump off opportunities for Ford, for Henderson. If you're putting all of that vertical threat ability on the field, it's something.
Yeah, I think, the having Jerry Jeudy, who had as many explosive plays as he did, and if it's Travis Hunter, you're getting another vertical threat. If it's Tet, certainly he can make plays down the field, but I think you think of him more of as a chain mover and possession guy who can make the occasional big splash, but Njoku in the middle of the field, like all those things. And suddenly you're talking about an offense you can get excited about, regardless of who the quarterback is.
Exactly.
I don't get me wrong. I understand where people are going to be like, man, I don't feel good about this. But what you want to have happen is you want to build, or at least theoretically have an offense that's sort of like what the Minnesota Vikings had. Like, we'll see what happens with Sam Darnold. I'm not willing to pay him $40 million. God bless him if he can get it somewhere else. But I have to believe that between Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold, some of their success is just predicated on the fact that you have so many playmakers and a strong offensive line. And it not difficult to fail, but man, they put you in really good position to succeed. And that's what you should want. That if you can get a Kirk Cousins to play well, or a Daniel Jones to play well, or whoever you want, that one, it's going to set you up in a situation where we talk about, like, we want to have the Buffalo Bills situation or the Baltimore Ravens situation where you maybe have to trade up to get a quarterback. But the reason you're trading up to get a quarterback is because you've set yourself up for success in terms of they're being put in a good situation. You can allow them to develop at their own rate. You can have a real plan in place for when you want to put them on the field. And then when they take the field, you feel good that they've got, all these playmakers around them that's going to make their life easier, as opposed to potentially walking into this season where, let's say it's Cam Ward, even if it's Cam Ward, and you're sitting there, man, we feel like we have to put him out on the field, and Jerry Jeudy's really good, and we love Njoku, and maybe we can run the ball a little bit better, but you don't want to have maybes. You want to be like, no, I count on this to be there. I know these guys are going to deliver, and with the changes to the offensive coaching staff and getting a system they feel is more sort of comes together better, then I think you're going to feel much better about it, as opposed to being disappointed that, man, I wish I could get my quarterback now. And I totally understand that feeling that you're like, again, you come out of the Deshaun Watson thing and you're like, okay, I had to suffer through this. Can I now move on to the good stuff? And you may have to defer that for a year. But if it means that suddenly you're getting what you hope is a premium wide receiver and a really good running back and more offensive line help, and you really transform that side of the ball, I think fans are going to be more excited about that. And I'm sure the Browns are sitting there going, even though I don't think he's going anywhere, that Myles Garrett is also more excited about that. And again, we can sell this as, well, Myles is just really impressed by our plan, and he just wants to sign the extension, and he's just happy to be here, and we're ready to get this thing rocking and rolling.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the adage of, acquiring a point guard who's great on the fast break, and you have no wing guys for him to, distribute the ball to. So, they all collapse on him, and, nothing comes of it. And this all, of course, comes down to, what are usually the biggest failures with rookie quarterbacks? Putting him in the correct position to succeed, or panicking and pulling the switch too early. So basically then your rookie quarterback then does what? He ends up with his second rookie year because there's a brand new system, most likely now new personnel, et cetera, all things that, certainly, hinder development. And, with these two, certainly Ward and Sanders, development is key, but also getting them where they have what they need is huge. I mean, because, people want to use the word development, but, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, neither one of these guys are a spring chicken. They're both coming into the NFL at 23 years old. They're both well-traveled through college football. So development, not necessarily the key for either of these guys to find a path to success. It's having them, in the correct situation, certainly with the correct personnel talent around them. Pete, defense, and this is where this scenario, in my opinion, could play out. Because if you do add the extra picks, you don't want to ignore this defensive line class by any means whatsoever. But what you know about this defensive line class is that it's extremely deep. It is very, very deep. So if you could get to the scenario where, hey, it's, 64, 90, I think it's 93 or 94, 103, you still can get some pretty damn good bang for your buck defensive line wise at those spots, just due to the absolute absurdity of the depth of this class. And I'm telling you all now, Thursday is the day you need to make sure you're watching the combine, because you were going to sit there in awe of the amount of defensive linemen that just go out there and just do these stupid, ridiculous things.
Yeah. So part of my argument for Abdul Carter, and just he's the best player in the draft.
No doubt. That is pretty much consensus. That's done in it's done in Sharpie. Everything it's 2 on.
But in addition to that, along with having Myles Garrett, I love what the Browns have in Isaiah McGuire, and I'm hoping he takes another big step forward.
The sack numbers are going to come. I think that's what throws everybody off. And remember, when early in Myles' career, this is what they were trying to do: find the sound technical guy, the do the assignment guy. Then they picked it up a little bit with a guy like Olivier Vernon. I think for McGuire, that will come. But it is very important to have a guy out there who plays sound, defensive, do what you are supposed to do football.
But even if he's going to naturally progress and become a more dominant pass rusher, I still want to get a small, twitchy guy to bring in, because the Browns don't have that. I mean, they Okoronkwo, they were hoping, but he's not really that guy.
He never was that guy. No.
He's very skilled at it, but he doesn't have that freaky twitch like you want in that. And like that was one of the selling points for Abdul Carter. But like, if you get into these 3rd and 4th and 5th round ranges, there's a bunch of these guys. Like Josiah Stewart from Michigan is one of those who I'm very curious to test. Undersized, because the Browns, what do they have? The Browns have Isaiah McGuire. They have Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett's a freak show. Isaiah McGuire, very sound, very good. And then behind him, they have Alex Wright coming back from an injury. He's not a small, twitchy guy. So somewhere, somehow, they need to get somebody else who can come in and give you something that's going to be a problem for the Lamar Jacksons of the world, for Joe Burrow.
Eagles and Hunt. He had an absolute monster Super Bowl, because all of a sudden you're getting beat on all day, and then comes in the guy that's even faster and more athletic than the starter.
So, like, whether it's Stewart from Michigan or Brady Swinson from LSU, I'm very curious to see how these guys do. Or even, if they go earlier, Donovan Izaraku from Boston College, who I absolutely love as a football player. I'm just curious about him as an athlete. Antoine Ryland Powell from Virginia Tech. There's a ton of these undersized, twitchy guys who do nothing but go get the quarterback. And so if the Browns do that, follow through this scenario we're laying out, they can go get this guy. And that player, as much as defensive line is a difficult position to sort of jump in and pick up really well, Jim Schwartz is just coming in and saying, listen, man, all we're doing is we're lining you out wide and we are sending you every play. And this is what you're naturally, gifted at. Like Josiah Stewart, the guy I pick out because he's got literally the highest pass rush win rate in the draft, is like 41% on third down and obvious passing situations. So like it's basically the situation he found himself at Michigan. Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham are doing all the dirty work, and he gets to just fly up the field. Well, that's the situation the Browns are hoping to create with their situation, and you have Myles Garrett on the other side. So there are some of those guys. And yes, defensive tackles, certainly. TJ Sanders is a guy who just screams Browns fit. But there are some of
those. He's one of your favorites, isn't he? Yeah, there's not anything you do without letting TJ Sanders' name get out your mouth.
He's the best Sanders in the draft. What can I say? But he you just look at guys who there are so many people who are frustrated with this team, and I get it. But one of the things I like the fact that they've been consistent with who they are is I can literally go, that's a guy the Browns would absolutely love, based on just how they play and the traits they have. And that's one of those guys that jumps out. Aeneas Peebles is another guy, undersized defensive tackle, but they may want to get some, it would be absolutely great if they can get somebody else who can do what Juwan Briggs is doing and give you 20 snaps. And then between him and Briggs, you can eventually move on from Dalvin Tomlinson because that time will come. And if you can get two guys to man that nose and be stout run defenders, and you just keep adding and adding and adding. I mean, you mentioned the Eagles and Jalix Hunt. He's got to step in because they're probably going to lose Josh Sweat, and they're probably going to lose Milton Williams. The Browns obviously traded Z. They've got to replace that edge, but they want to just keep adding, and that is Jim Schwartz's lifeblood. This is a great class for him to do it. So obviously, Abdul Carter is the dream scenario, and I don't know how more people aren't excited to the prospect of just killing every quarterback on the planet, but in the way that the Eagles have done, where they're getting third-round picks to sort of step up and fill these roles, I think that path is there if the Browns do trade down and do go heavy offense.
And, it would just, so in this scenario, it's basically, understanding that maybe you were not getting the long-term answer. And look, it's got to be 6-7 weeks into this since the season ended. And basically telling you from the beginning of this is everything worked out well for the Browns as far as saying, oh my God, we can get out of this horrible Deshaun Watson nightmare. The only problem, you have cap space, you have capital, you have the number 2 pick. It's just maybe there really isn't the true quarterback answer this year. So if that's the case, go to the food store, go to the can sale, buy all of the sides you can, and, revisit a year from now, and we'll go see whether or not we're serving with chicken, steak, Pete's favorite ham, of course, any of that good stuff.
Especially if you're doing it and you got extra picks, like you got extra.
If you're going into 2026 and you can get all this done, and then keep in mind, in this scenario, in 2026, you're manned with two first-round picks.
Yeah, and God knows, especially if you trade with the Jets or the Raiders, you never know. They could easily end up being awful, and being the Jets or the Raiders, and suddenly you're sitting in that situation. Or, you as people obviously remember, like the Browns made that trade with Houston Texans with Deshaun Watson. He tore his ACL. They went 4-12 or whatever it was that first year. Browns
Number 4 and yep.
So. That scenario could also play out. I mean, you take advantage of desperate teams, and if you can, and add that ammunition. So, like, if you can do all those things, and we get 3 offensive guys on those first 3 picks and picks for next year, I think people are going to feel a lot better about this team. Now, as you and I are going to continue to pound on this, they got to hit those picks. Like, they've got to make those count. Like Travis Hunter or Tet McMillan or that running back can't come in and not do much. And, the injury thing is always a risk, but like they need those guys to look like foundational type players that you can build on. So then when we are talking about the quarterback, again, we're talking about not, man, I hope this guy can do this, like we're doing with Cedric Tillman for reasons that are unfortunately out of his control. We are sitting here going, Jerry Jeudy had another great year. The rookie receiver looks great. Cedric Tillman hopefully had a good, healthy year. David Njoku looks good, and we're running the ball, and we have really good protection or better protection up front. Now we're all excited, going, man, which quarterback are we going to go get? And maybe you don't get, maybe Drew Allar goes number 1 and you don't get him, but like if it's a Cade Klubnik, or there's a lot of quarterbacks in this class that I think I've seen some evaluators start to peek ahead and go, oh, maybe this is why teams aren't as high on this class.
Look, it happens. Look, there was the Kenny Pickett draft. There was the Geno Smith draft. It happens. It's every now and then you get a year, and we've certainly seen it with other positional groups. There's no question about it. So it's bound to happen, at the quarterback position as well. It's just kind of the way it all goes. Look, we put together obviously another strong week here. Just continue to pumping out content day in, day out for everybody over here at the OBR streaming network. Whether it's this year and all the shows that have come after, appreciate all the support. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed over Twitch. The daily content that the group of writers are putting out, fantastic. Make sure you're checking all that out. Hope Jack Duffin, who's been putting out a bunch of work, is already, off to his weekend, because I'm sure the running back talk was probably enough for get him sick. Sorry, Jack. Apologies on that. But again, of course, appreciate all of you. Make sure you're checking out everything, from Petey's, continuing to crush it here. Combine is coming. Certainly one of my favorite events in the NFL. And also, a lot will come from Combine week as well, not just player evaluation. And, we'll see, and apparently agents are going to the Combine, so we might find out some things. It was breaking news when I heard that this week, and absolutely mind-blowing stuff. Yeah, a lot of stuff to come. So appreciate certainly everybody. Of course, Rouse 3D brought to you on the OBR by State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. Appreciate everybody. Again, this has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. We will talk to you all next week.